Yes, indeed. Welcome to our live hangout, live stream, whatever the Utes call it. My name's Patrick Coffin, host of the Patrick Coffin Show, and the creator, with my good wife Mariela, of Coffin Nation. Subscribe to this channel, and just let me get this out at the beginning. Subscribe to this YouTube channel. I'm also on Twitter at Patrick_Coffin, and we're going to talk about Sysm today. Who wants Sysm? Pope Francis said some very, I guess, casual-sounding things on a recent flight earlier this month, one of his Mozambique trips, that he said he's not afraid of Sysm. He hopes it doesn't happen. And reporters kept peppering him with questions about American conservatives. This is a U.S.-led Sysm. And so that's really what our topic is. Our members inside Coffin Nation have first crack at the guest, and his name is Phil Lawler. He is born and raised in Boston. He's the author or editor of 10 books. Most recently, he's been on the show talking about The Smoke of Satan and Lost Shepherd. And if I went on and on about Phil's book, I would have to go to my on and on anonymous meeting. Hey, Phil, great to have you aboard, sir.
Good to have you. Good to be with you.
Okay, so we're just making sure that Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter are all synced up there. But I want to welcome people who just joined us. If you're new to me, I host a weekly podcast called, oddly enough, The Patrick Coffin Show. It drops early Tuesday morning. And my sweet spot is Catholic culture, faith, cinema, a little bit of politics, a little bit of comedy. Ultimately, the point is to encourage discipleship with Jesus Christ and the church that he founded, which is the Catholic Church. So if anything has offended or triggered you so far, maybe you should stay and listen, or not. We're going to have a great discussion, charitable and frank, about what it's been like these last 7 years with the increasingly weaponized ambiguity of many of the things that Pope Francis has said, not just unofficially and impromptu, but also in documents like Amoris Laetitia and his reboot of the Catechism with respect to the death penalty. Phil, I'm a cradle Catholic, kind of raised, rebelled, returned. I know you followed closely what happened in Boston in the long Lent of 2002. So you have a unique long view as a professional journalist. Did you ever imagine that you and I would be talking about a pope who blithely brings up Sysm? I mean, it's come to this point finally. Are you as dizzy as I am with all this?
Yes, I'm dizzy, and I'm suffering from a little bit of exhaustion, and I know an awful lot of Catholics are. It's just the pounding that we've been taking over the last 5 years, 7 years, 3 years, depending when you decided it was going to start getting to you. It's been exhausting, and for a lot of people, I think, demoralizing. I think, in my experience, because I'm online with Catholic World News every day, I saw people turning off, just had enough, didn't want to hear anymore. I do see a little bit of a change in that. People are tuning in again, but that's not necessarily a good sign. I think they're tuned in because when the Pope starts talking about Sysm, you realize this is a headline story. This is something I want to hear about.
Back in the first year of his pontificate, you, like many people, including myself, were kind of enthused. A South American, going to the peripheries, kind of fresh air thing. I had some eyebrow-raising moments, but basically cautiously optimistic. You co-wrote a book about his pontificate. And do you take back any of the things that you said in that book, or did they reflect the things that you were seeing with your own eyes?
I don't think I would take it back, although if I read it now, parts of it would certainly trouble me. I would look back and I would say, oh, Phil, were you very naive at this point? Didn't you see some of the trouble signs? Yeah. But I was open to something new, and I think I'm not ashamed of that. I think, like most Catholics, my default position is that the Pope is saying the right thing. And if he's doing something that's different, well, I want to stay and listen and see what I can learn from it. And it was very gradually that I reached the point where I said, I can no longer reconcile what he's saying.
Yeah, he's freezing up badly. Phil, you're starting to freeze up a little bit.
Many times with...
Yeah, Phil, I think your internet signal's a little iffy. Yeah, you were saying that you, over time, you couldn't keep domesticating the things that he was saying and doing. I had the exact same experience.
Exactly. It's troubling. but you reach a point where you say there is a problem here, and once you've reached that point, it's in a way liberating.
Could you bring them? Right.
Because
just let your hair down and just speak the truth. Don't pretend that you're responsible for what the Pope in Rome says, because no one is except for him.
That's right. And also to say, well, yes, there's a problem here, but it's not the first time that the church has had this problem. And the church will get through this. Mm-hmm. The church always gets through it.
Yeah, I think your signal's a little bit iffy, but we're gonna pull through here. We were also pull through with this live stream, Phil. How does the Catechism define schism? What are we talking about here? Are we talking about an eyebrow raised at something the Pope said, or disagreement with a prudential decision? Schism is a heavyweight offense against the unity of the Church. What is schism?
Schism is a refusal to recognize the authority of the Roman Pontiff. And I don't know anybody who is talking in those terms. I know a lot of people, and some of them are talking in extreme terms. None of them is talking about schism.
I know no one who wants schism, and I know a lot of leaders that the Holy Father would brand ultra-conservative, which I would say are faithful Catholics who want to live in continuity with apostolic teaching. I don't know anyone who's speaking this way in the United States or anywhere else. Is this another straw man that the Pope is kind of going after? And if so, why? What's cui bono? To what good is it to talk this way and then to dismiss it as something that is not all that important?
That's a two-part question. It's not a real thing. It is a straw man. It's a straw man that's being set up by some people very close to the Pope, by Father Antonio Spadaro, for instance, by Austin Ivory in England. People who are very anxious to brand people like us as schismatics, people like Cardinal Burke as schismatic, which is slanderous. But it keeps coming out. And what's happened over the past month or so is an increasing, like a crescendo of this rhetoric of you nasty Americans are schismatic. And as I say, again, nobody's talking about schism. Nobody's denying the authority of the Pope. Everyone is suggesting that the Pope should change what he is saying, but that's not denying his authority. It's, in a sense, recognizing of his authority and recognizing the severity of the problem that we face. So then you ask, cui bono? Well, put it this way. If you are in danger of splitting up a party, isn't it convenient for you to say, oh no, those guys over there are about to split up the party. They're the ones that are splitting it up. Worry about them. Don't worry about us. And that's what I think is happening. So that the attention is all on those nasty old Americans. Meanwhile, you have the German bishops who are now plotting their own synod on which they plan to doctrinal issues. Now, if you have a national bishops' conference voting on doctrinal issues, that's a threat of schism. That's a threat of denying the authority of the universal church.
Yeah, the compare and contrast with the German bishops to any American bishop or bishops, the U.S. conference as a whole, is a study of high contrast, because the Pope, through Cardinal Mark Ouellet, the Congregation for Bishops prefect, wrote a very stern, rather clear letter a few weeks ago as a kind of salvo to head off at the pass, if you will, a German synod, which the German bishops, under the leadership of Reinhard Marx, has said, look, we want these to be universal norms. This is a kind of a quasi-universal synod here. Rome is clearly saying you can't do that. It's not ecclesiastically valid, to which Cardinal Marx and the other German bishops have said, you might, I don't know, go pound sand, or we're just going to go ahead, we're going to start our schism. Excuse me, Freudian slip. We're going to start our schism. There, I did it again. That's actually funny. Would that be a schismatic act to disobey the wishes of the sovereign pontiff in favor of your own thing, sort of the Protestant principle incarnated?
Well, again, schism is a heavy term, and I wouldn't throw it around lightly the way some people are throwing it around. It's leaning in that direction, and it's not just, by the way, it's not just Cardinal Ouellet, it's also Pope Francis himself, who back in June wrote to the German bishops and advised them not to go down this road, advised them to wait for the judgment of the Universal Church. And so they're definitely a centrifugal force there. Now, all they've done so far is yesterday they voted to hold this meeting and to keep the agenda intact, despite what the Vatican has asked or requested or directed. Despite the Vatican saying it was not ecclesiologically valid. So if there's a disobedience there, if they get to the point of defining doctrine in opposition to the defined doctrine of the Church, then I think you're on the road to schism.
Yeah, what you mentioned earlier is interesting about, hey, we don't want schism. Well, look what those guys are doing. It's like a John Wayne movie where someone throws a whiskey shot into the crowd to start a fist fight so they can go, these people are so violent, right? Look over there. To say that something is ecclesiastically invalid, that's also strong language.
Yes, it is.
Which
and
means,
it wasn't just Cardinal Ouellet.
Yeah.
It wasn't just Cardinal Ouellet. He also had analysis done by the Archbishop, and I'm sorry I've blanked on his name, who's the head of the Pontifical Council for Interpretation of Legislative Texts, which is the top canon law body in the Vatican, to say essentially the same thing. You can't do this. And by the way, there are also, when the German bishops voted to do this, to go ahead with their plans, the vote was 51-12, which means there are 12 German bishops who recognize that this is a bad idea. A couple of them quite vociferously. So this is the split that we're talking about. This is the dangerous split.
Margot Basso asks, are the German bishops more or less already in schism? Would the result be the Church of Germany, similar to the Church of England? Is that maybe a possible end game?
Well,
God forbid.
Yeah, God forbid. You know, the other string to pull into this rather difficult mosaic. No, mosaics don't have strings. What am I thinking of?
Never saw a metaphor I wasn't happy to mix. Yeah. Jagged puzzle pieces. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyway, is that last week, Cardinal Marx, the president of the German Bishops' Conference, met with the Pope. There's no announcement from the Vatican about what they said, but we can guess it was about this meeting. And Cardinal Marx went away saying the Pope did not put up a stoplight. So here we have one of the weird situations that keeps coming up in this pontificate, where the German bishops are doing something that the Pope has told them not to do, that the Vatican has told them not to do. And they're saying the Vatican didn't tell us not to do it. So I don't know how this comes out. If the German bishops say something, approve a resolution that's contrary to what the Church teaches, and the Pope is silent about it, then where does that leave us? I honestly don't know. We're in uncharted waters here.
There's a paradox about Father Martin Luther I want to ask you about, Phil. You can say at least Father Luther had an unambiguous ambition. He wrote his 95 Theses. He posted them on the Wittenberg Cathedral door, and he said, "I'm out. I'm going to marry a nun, and I'm going to foment disobedience, and for these particular reasons." With the pronouncements of Cardinal Marx and the other high-profile Germans like Walter Kasper, it's this sort of neo-modernist word salad. It's very hard to pin down. It's like trying to nail Jell-O to the wall, which reminds me of the definition that Pius X gave of modernism as the synthesis of all heresies. It's very hard. It's so mushy and slippery without edges. Do you know what I mean? That's the frustrating part. You can analyze, look at the footnotes or Section 8 of Amoris Laetitia. Some say this, some say that.
Right. And that's the mark of this pontificate, to have teaching that is ambiguous, but put it this way, there are different ways to interpret Amoris Laetitia. It seems to me clearly to be at least in tension with what the Church said beforehand, at least in tension. But some people say it can be reconciled. And those people are not in favor at the Vatican these days. And other people say it's a radical new teaching. And those people are in favor at the Vatican these days. So, you can draw your own conclusions there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it goes to the spirit of fear, I think, that governs a lot of church leaders. They know if they put their head 1 inch above the gunwale of the boat, that they're risking any further advancement in the church, because the Pope seems to have surrounded himself with yes men and people who are generally easy to manage. And there seems to be a turnover of staff. There's a kind of desire to out-compliment the Pope on the part of certain prelates and those who speak forthrightly. If you read any particular random paragraph of Robert Cardinal Sarah, and then any particular random paragraph of any of the men mentioned, say, in the first Archbishop Vigano letter, one's tempted to think that they belong to a different religion.
Yes.
Another study in contrast.
It is. And, sometimes I ask myself, who's manipulating whom? There's no question that Pope Francis has been authoritarian in his style of rule. For all the rhetoric about accompaniment and mercy and so forth, he's been at times brutal in dismissing people who disagree with him. On the other hand, there are the people surrounding him who seem to me very successful in manipulating him and putting him in a position where he has to either come down or very big things slide.
Right. Yeah, your signal was just a little bit wonky there, Phil. But I agree. Let me go to Carl Strelos in Australia. Why can't we deal with all these people who are defying the teachings of the Church? In Australia next year, they will be having a 2020 synod discussing the same old topics: married priests, so-called gay marriage, divorce, remarriage, etc., etc., etc. Parishes have been asked to submit questions and suggestions for this event. I'll say, at least my parish is asking for better catechesis. I have seen this synod business at the diocesan level before, Phil, and it's straight from Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky. All the decisions are prefab, and all the appearance of free discussion at the small table group is pure illusion. That obviously is by design. Is that on a macro level what we saw in 2015 with the two synods on marriage and the family?
Oh, what you saw in 2015 in Rome with those two synods was much more blatant than what happens at the diocesan level, at least in my experience. Mm-hmm. I've been through a synod as well, and it was prefabbed. I mean, it was arranged, and everybody knew in advance what was going to come out of it, except a few things that were brushed aside immediately anyway.
Right.
But that one, you had... my wife was just reminding me before I went on about the books that magically disappeared, the books that were put out by our friends at Ignatius Press.
Yes, Remaining in the Truth of Christ.
Right, and were sent to all the Synod Fathers, but didn't get to most of them because the Vatican Post Office didn't deliver them. And obviously because the Office of the Synod didn't want them delivered. Right. You have the appointment of liberal prelates to the drafting committee. You had, in 2015, with those synods, you had this synod on the family, you had items put onto the draft final document that all of the participating bishops agreed they had not discussed. It was just put there. It was a little depth charge. Let's see if we can get away with this.
Yeah.
You had resolutions that were not approved by the synod, but were put in the final document anyway. It was clearly a bag job.
Can you click share, Phil, on your timeline? We'll expand the audience size here. Do you know what I mean?
How do I do it? You know what? To do that, I'm going to have to leave this computer and go over to the other one.
Oh, no, that's okay then. Yeah. We got listeners and viewers from Norway and Michigan and Seattle. Welcome to the internet. The internet's quite a wonderful invention, huh, Phil? You and I are talking, and people from multiple countries are listening in, and engaging. Here's Siegfried from Argentina. Love to hear what it's like on the ground is there. What's that? Yeah, if you just open a new tab, you can do that, Phil, without leaving your computer. No problem. Librarian at Large, Ottawa, Canada. Yeah, Emily says, I thought the title was implying that Phil actually wanted Sysm. No. Glad to have that clarified. Brad Patel, my good friend from Minnesota, Coffin Nation members. Galore, Casey Campbell, Jorge. Oh, Jorge asks, what's the pontiff's goal? It seems more than just changing the church. That gets to the nub of it, doesn't it?
Oh, I think isn't that sufficient? I think it is changing the church. That's his goal. And that's why I say I think that the discussion of Sysm is an effort to, it's a misdirection play. Mm-hmm. It's look at those people over there because we are actually going to change the church and we're going to stay in control because these people over here who are doing what Catholics have always done, we're going to say that those are the people who are schismatic. Mm-hmm. I think that's what's going on. It's an earnest effort to change the way the church operates.
People are asking some canonical questions like, can you be a schismatic without being a heretic? I don't know the answer. I'm not a trained canon lawyer. It's funny. A lot of these... Well, I've never heard the word heresy thrown around in the last 25 years than I have in the last couple of years. Heresy was like something very strange and almost impossible to imagine under St. John Paul II and Benedict, both of whose papacy and teaching style was, even if in the case of John Paul II, it was very elliptical and hard to understand at the first read, with Benedict, there's this depth and richness and German clarity. And no one talked about heresy because the line in the sand about what was and what was not Catholic teaching was understandable to people who knew how to read. Now those days are gone.
It is truly incredible to me that I'm living at a time where people are asking whether the Pope himself is endorsing heresy. I mean, any previous time, it was almost by definition that heresy was disagreeing with the Pope rather than agreeing with him. This is, again, we're in uncharted waters. None of us really know how this is going to come out.
Someone with a fake name asks, are sedevacantists schismatics? I think that's an easy yes. Obviously, yes. You reject the sovereign pontiff, the vicar of Christ. Yeah, that would make you a schismatic. Are modernists schismatics? No, probably just low information or liberal. Someone asked on Periscope, Matthew Marsden, your sound has dropped. Hopefully the sound is okay now. Maybe you can let us know. Oh, someone from Apologetic Camp. Wonderful. I'll try again here. Here's the perennial question, Phil. How do you broach this one? Are we living in the end times?
I don't know. I mean...
Stop being around the bush, Phil Lawler. Commit to an opinion.
Here's the thing. I don't know. I mean, does it matter? They're pretty close to the end times for me. I mean, 30 years from now, I'll be gone. That's the relevant question for me. I don't know. Are there signs of that these are the end times? Yeah. Mm-hmm. There probably always have been.
Right.
I'm not sure that's a useful question to pursue because we just don't know.
Yeah, the Catechism.
Not the hour.
I believe it's in the life of the church, part of the Catechism, describes this is the eschatological era. We're now in the end times since the resurrection and the ascension and the foundation of the church. We don't know if Jesus is going to come back next Tuesday or 10,000 years from now. I'm not crazy about the question either. I mean, we'll know. There are strong accompanying signs. But a lot of people are into what I call baptized astrology, Phil. Yeah. Unapproved apparitions, 3 days of darkness, doom and gloom, a sort of apocalyptic fear-mongering to make people kind of hunker down into their cocoons, which is totally opposed to the teaching of Jesus Christ that you and I are supposed to be out in the marketplace. We're supposed to be sowing seeds. We're supposed to be talking to people and building structures that are more just and building a culture where it's easier to be a good, loving, strong person. If you're worried about the sky falling, you can't really engage in the world as an evangelist. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. And what I was thinking, what I wanted to say is you also can't engage properly as a journalist, which is my profession.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a low tolerance for a lot of people who are more or less on our side of things, who are over-interpreting things, who are continually telling us the sky is falling. Look, the news that we have is extreme enough. You don't have to sensationalize it.
Mm-hmm.
So please don't go further than the facts will take you, because you just bring discredit on all of us who are trying to get those facts out. Stick to the facts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Dragnet, Joe Friday, M.O.
Yes.
Right. People are talking about the title. There is a semicolon there, people. Topic, who wants Sysm? We're not saying me or Phil Lawler wants Sysm. God forbid. Not at all. Ginny Martellino asks on Facebook, why did Pope Benedict have to resign? Along with a sigh.
Yeah. And I'm sighing too every time I think back on it. You know, when
Yeah, Phil, try that again. I don't know what's wrong with the signal. Sorry, Phil, your signal went complete shutdown. Can you try that again? You said you've been sighing since you learned that he had abdicated. Can you come at it again, please?
Yeah. When I first learned, I said, "Oh, he must be very ill. He's probably got bad news from the doctors. He knows he has very little time to live, or maybe he's losing his faculties." Obviously, those were not the reasons, because he's still alive. He's still relatively healthy for his age, and apparently has all his mental faculties, which are considerable still.
Yeah, he's duking it out in magazines on controversies. He's acting like what he wants.
I understand he tires very easily, which you would expect of a man that age, but he's as sharp as ever when he's awake.
Yeah.
And didn't have to. Why did he have to resign? He didn't have to resign. So the question is, why did he resign? It was an extraordinary step, and I wish I knew the whole answer. I take him at face value when he said that he thought the job required something that he could no longer provide, more energy. It may very well be that he was saying implicitly he didn't have the answers, that he had recognized the severity of the problems in Rome, the problems at the Vatican, and he recognized he was not the man to handle them.
He did make allusions to the wolves. Pray for me that I might not flee from the wolves at the very onset of his pontificate. And I understand from one of his accounts in book form with Pete Shavewald, he clearly didn't want the gig. He asked to resign as prefect of the CDF under John Paul II several times. The Holy Father always declined. He wanted to go back to Regensburg and Bavaria to become a scholar and pray in a monastery and crank out books. So he gets elected, and what does he do? He cranks out big scholarly books called the Jesus of Nazareth trilogy, which are wonderful, rich, great reading, but not authoritative. Of all the problems of the church, it just seemed like, we could use some. Start with the liturgy, the need for reforming the liturgy. He seemed to have behaved like someone who really didn't want the gig, and when he realized the heavy lifting involved in facing down the various forms of mafia in and around the Curia, he couldn't do it.
I think there's a lot to that. I think he was realistic about his own strengths and weaknesses. He knew he was a scholarly type. He wanted to be a scholar. That's all he ever wanted to be. Mm-hmm. Other than being a priest. And he recognized that he was not a terribly good judge of character among people he was working with. He had the defect of a good professor that people who studied with him will tell you that he would listen to all different arguments. If you disagreed with him, he would summarize your argument more persuasively than you had, and then he'd pull it apart. And I think he thought the best of people. He thought he could work with people. He knew what was going on in the Vatican. He spoke about the wolves. He spoke about the filth in the church. Mm-hmm. He never really ripped into it. And I think maybe he recognized it was just something he's constitutionally incapable of doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've heard it opined that one could make an argument that John Paul II might have been a better candidate for resignation in light of his very slow decline. A lot of things seeped into the church. Decisions were made under the Pope's nose in those last, say, 5 or 10 years that would not have passed muster in the early 80s when he was at the height of his powers. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think that's another factor, that then Cardinal Ratzinger was at his side, and he saw what happened when John Paul II was in decline and really couldn't do what he had once done. And an awful lot of the power devolved to people who surrounded him, and I wish it hadn't. And I can easily see that then when he was the Pope, Benedict said, well, as I'm getting weaker, other people are going to get stronger, and the results aren't going to be good.
Well, good popes, even saints, can be bamboozled by hucksters and fraudsters and corrupt men who wear Roman collars. That's certainly true. Sanctity is not the same thing as perfect prudential wisdom, for sure, to say the very least. Phil, you mentioned Father Spadaro, the kind of roving editor of Civiltà Cattolica, which at one point was sort of the unofficial, it was sort of up there with L'Osservatore Romano in being the kind of publication that had the Holy See's implicit backing. Is that an accurate summary of the history of Civiltà Cattolica, the Jesuit journal?
Yeah, except that you put it in the past tense. It still is. The articles in Civiltà Cattolica are edited, or at least cleared in advance, by the Secretariat of State. So it's not an official Vatican journal, but you can be pretty sure that nothing gets in it that high Vatican officials find objectionable.
Yeah, I think that L'Osservatore Romano is better known to American readers, I think. But yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, so it's still present. There were. I want to. Normally, I'm allergic to reading, but I'll just I'll throw this out there and get your take on it. This is the recent articles by Father Spadaro and the Argentinian Presbyterian pastor Marcello Figueroa, and they talk about the ecumenism of hatred among this integralist American / evangelical hybrid, Hydra monster. I have no idea what ecumenism of hatred is. I thought ecumenism was the intentional dialogue to help Protestants and other non-Christian groups understand the claims of the Church of Rome. I don't hate Protestants or anyone else. I'm commanded not to hate anyone. Is that an invented devil term, ecumenism of hatred?
It absolutely is, and that was one of the most disgraceful articles that has come out of the Vatican in my lifetime. I read it, and I was stunned by the sheer ignorance. It's about American politics. And if you want to write about American politics, it would be a good idea to have at least a little bit of a clue about American politics. They don't. They're citing people as major influences in the evangelical scene, who most evangelicals have the church and state issues. Yeah. It's ignorant. It's slanderous. It's an attack on Americans, many good Americans who are trying to uphold moral principles that are, consonant with Catholic Church teaching, whether they're Catholics or not. It's a vociferous attack. It's really a disgrace. I mean, somebody on the editorial board should have said, take this back, take this draft back, and have it read by an American who knows which end is up.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, maybe run it through an American reader first to vet it. Right. Even if they don't agree with the conclusions, vet it for accuracy about how things work over here.
And now here's what's very troublesome, is that in the latest issue of Civiltà Cattolica, they have an interview or a report on the Pope's talking with Jesuits in Mozambique, and he specifically commended that article. So
yeah, that's why I'm bringing it up. Yeah,
this is his vision of Americans. We're these nasty people who hate.
He recommends it. He brings up the phrase ecumenism of hatred, and now he goes on. So these are the Pope's words to a circle, literal circle of chairs. He spoke for an hour, kind of Q&A style with Mozambique Jesuits and others. Today, I felt these are the Pope's words now. So don't shoot the messenger. I'm quoting the Pope here. This is the official English translation. Today, I felt a certain bitterness after meeting with young people. The Pope says, a woman approached me with a young man and a young woman. I was told they were part of a slightly fundamentalist movement. She said to me in perfect Spanish, Your Holiness, I'm from South Africa. This boy was a Hindu and converted to Catholicism. This girl was Anglican and converted to Catholicism. Unquote. But she told me in a triumphant way, as though she was showing off a hunting trophy. I felt uncomfortable and said to her, Madam, evangelization, yes. Proselytism, no. And then he goes on, I'm skipping over one paragraph because it doesn't really relate to this. St. Francis of Assisi told his friars, go out into the world, evangelize, when necessary, use words. Well, we know that his namesake never said that. That's not an accurate quote from Francis of Assisi. But, Phil, that woman knows, I mean, if I'm assuming, I want to give the Pope the credit, that's not a made-up anecdote, the Pope doesn't meet 5,000 people per day. Saying that, the fact that it hit the world news wire, to me is a little cruel and sort of insulting to a Catholic woman who was proud that two more sinners entered into the Catholic Church. It doesn't compute with me. What was your reaction to what he said to her on the spot in front of, presumably, certainly in front of the two people?
Well, I was appalled, and unless I'm mistaken, maybe you can confirm or deny this for me, that came right after he endorsed the ecumenism of hatred article. It's like the next paragraph.
It's the next thing he said. Definitely the same session. Yes.
So he's just slapped me in the face once, and now he's slapping in the face people who are proud of making converts. Well, I'm proud of making converts. I mean, I rejoice when one of my friends comes into the church, and this woman was proud and she was rejoicing. And I guess he didn't like something about her attitude. He says it seemed triumphalistic. There's no evidence whatsoever that what she did was anything but the best sort of evangelization. And by the way, it worked, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe we should be listening more to the people who are bringing converts into the church, rather than listening to, say, the German bishops who are driving people out of the church. And you have tens of thousands formally leaving, not just drifting out, but renouncing their membership in the Catholic Church. Why are we listening to those people and not to these people? This distinction between evangelization and proselytism, I guess I understand it, but if, whenever you're successful, the Pope's first impulse is to say, oh, that was a bad thing, it's just really hard for me to understand.
Yeah, Pope defenders will say proselytism is the hard sell. You've got a white shoes, a white belt. You're a used car salesman. You're pushy. You won't leave people alone. You're kind of manipulating people. But evangelization is just being a really nice person, and then you'll draw people. And then maybe if they ask about Jesus, maybe you can have the conversation. But it's the ultimate soft pedal. I did a keyword search of the working document, the Laboris Instrumentum of the upcoming, what I call the German Zonian Synod. And there are 42,000, I want to get this right, 42,750 words. 4 mentions of our Lord. So Jesus merits less than 0.5% of the total, a tiny sliver. So at least you can say working documents reflect this idea that evangelizing people into the Catholic Church, telling them about the claims of the Church and, in continuity with sacred tradition, is proselytizing and therefore not desirable.
That's crazy, isn't it? I mean, first of all, your description of the hard sell, to go back to that anonymous woman, as I said, there's zero evidence that she was guilty of the hard sell. But what kind of sell is it if you never mention your product? I mean, yeah,
isn't that the metric, Phil? I always say, because I was in Catholic education, my kids are in Catholic schools. I talk to a lot of people in and out of Catholic school systems, and I say the best metric of the success, if you will, or the effectiveness of a Catholic school is the degree to which non-Catholic students, before they leave grade 12, as we say in Canada, 12th grade, what's the proportion of those students that want to become Catholic because of their experience in a Catholic educational environment? If it's low, the school's doing something wrong. It really should be high. Am I being a triumphalist here?
No, I think that's right. I think another way that you measure, and I try to impress this whenever I can on church leaders and pastors, another way that you measure it is you ask, okay, you have kids in CCD. Make a note of those kids, where they are 10 years later. If they're not in the pews, then there was something wrong with CCD. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You know, we can't be just content that, they made their first communion, they got through confirmation, bye. See when we bury you.
Yeah, well, that's what confirmation has become. Just to linger on the youth situation for a while, confirmation it's like an archipelago island. On the one side, you have the ocean of non-attendance since their baptism, First Holy Communion, First Confession, and on the other side, in time, there's their death or their marriage. And so you've got cynical 14-year-olds with their arms folded and their eyeballs rolling. I like the original order that bishops like Thomas Olmsted of Phoenix, Archbishop Sam Aquila of Denver, and other bishops have adopted the way the Catechism presents confirmation, which presumes a much earlier reception. I mean, children, before they hit high school, they're also in need of grace. They're also capable of growing in virtue.
So much so. Yeah, I mean, good heavens, get them all the grace you can as fast as you can.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm in the, go back to the lineup twice of the Grace Buffet Club myself. All right, I want to get to some more questions here. Yes, Bob Sullivan says that fictional quote attributed to St. Francis of Assisi is almost always used by people who want to quash evangelization. 100% true. Yeah, why can't we have the both and? Yeah, yes, of course, act in a virtuous way, be kind, be patient, be courteous, and also talk about Jesus. Why are Catholics afraid to talk about Jesus, Phil? Catholics seem very comfortable, whether they're on the intellectual side or, they're ordinary Catholics who do non-academic jobs. We seemed comfortable with church documents and the magisterium and bishop statements and sacraments, but talking about our friendship with Christ, how we came to Christ, we kind of write that off as a Protestant thing. Does that make sense?
I mean, it doesn't make sense, but it's a valid observation. What you're saying, okay. We should be better at it, And now, to give Pope Francis his due, I said this at the time, that after he was elected, I found myself talking about Jesus more. I found myself talking with friends and acquaintances about Jesus. There was a new breeze blowing there. There was a Francis effect. I think it's evaporated, but there was that effect.
Or it's been replaced by another effect.
Yeah.
But another, if you want to look at it as an opportunity instead of just a challenge, I always think of the German Freudian slip. Another German Freudian slip. The Chinese word for crisis is derived from two characters that mean danger and chance. The chance for us, if you will, the benefit, is that this papacy is an invitation to learn the deposit of faith and what has been handed down. So many Catholics have been box checking kind of pew sitters, and now they're being invited in a paradoxical way because of the lack of clarity. Well, what's required? Like the rich young man to Jesus. What must I do to inherit eternal life? So that's another opportunity for I won't say teachable moment. That sounds condescending, but it's an opportunity to grow in the knowledge of the why behind the what of being a Catholic.
One of the things that I've been trying to get across recently is that this is a great opportunity for lay people, and I think particularly American lay people, because right now we seem to be in the eye of the storm, being more or less accused of being schismatic. And I think it is up to us to demonstrate to the world, to the Catholic world and the world beyond, that we're not schismatic, we are faithful Catholics. We're doing what Catholics have always done, what Catholics always will do. What we believe is what Catholics always and everywhere have believed. And to get this across frankly, at a time when we're not getting the leadership we need from the hierarchy. And an awful lot of good Catholics have spent too much time complaining that they're not getting good leadership from the bishops and from their pastors.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, the complaints are justified. But what are you going to do about it? You can keep waiting and keep complaining, or you can do something yourself. Now, in that same, I think it was in the same airplane interview when the Pope was talking about American schismatics, he said something very interesting about which was the council where he said the bishops were filing in and the lay people were standing around the cathedral with clubs and demanding that the church define the Virgin Mary as the Mother of God.
Mm-hmm.
The lay people, it wasn't that the bishops wanted to do it, they didn't want to do it. The laity demanded it. In fact, kind of used intimidation to get there. And whatever they used, it worked. And maybe it's time for us to do that.
Yeah, maybe we can start a torch pitchfork rental.
I want to shy away from saying using clubs.
No, right.
But you can use your checkbook, and you can use your letter writing capacity, and you can use the internet as we're doing right now.
Mm-hmm. It gets frustrating for lay people, Phil, based on what you just said, because Christ gave us a hierarchical church that's baked into the structure of the church. That's never going to change. It's the way Christ wants it. There will always be priests. There will always be male. There will always be bishops. There will always be a pope. And so lay people who are orthodox and dynamically evangelical routinely feel like they are the target of the Pope's digs, like their efforts are somehow against the gospel. And right. I think the checkbook is one of the only salient practical things we can do, to just refuse to buy into the prescriptions and prohibitions of the Usccb. There's a writer you might be familiar with. She has the same surname as you, has asked rhetorically, maybe not, speculatively, about whether or not it's time to abolish the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. At one point, they didn't exist. What if they popped out of existence? What are your thoughts on disassembling the Usccb?
It's an article that's obviously my wife who wrote that, and as I pointed out to her, I wrote roughly the same article in 1986.
That's astounding, isn't it?
In 1986, everybody thought, oh, that's kind of a funny idea. They recognized it as just one of those extreme, the hyperbolic suggestion that you make just to try to make a point. Mm-hmm. But when Lawler wrote it a couple of weeks ago, people are on board, jumping up and down and getting their pitchforks ready, as you suggest. And that, by the way, if you're a bishop, you should be worried about that. You should be nervous about that. The level of frustration and outright anger among the Catholic laity, I don't think bishops understand just how high it is the most active, the most loyal, the most faithful laity. But to get back to something you said, I think, yes, your checkbook is powerful, but it's not the only thing you can do. And I firmly believe that lay people have to challenge pastors and bishops. And by challenge, I don't mean with clubs, but I do mean don't let them get away with, the soap. Don't let them get away with these simple answers. When you're told something that you know is baloney, tell the bishop, yes, Your Excellency, what you just said is baloney, and you know it, and I know it, so let's
maybe stop the kabuki dance.
Really?
I think platforms like Twitter and Facebook have been a bit of a game changer as far as shepherds getting feedback from their flock. I think that the peasants on Twitter, and I'm a proud peasant myself, respectfully responding to things that bishops say in tweets, I think is healthy for the church, as long as it doesn't descend into, hiding behind a fake name. Those are easy to discount. I block fake name cowards myself. But for bishops who are paying attention to what people on the ground in the pews are thinking, it's got to be a wake-up call. And I think you and I agree, it's very important to praise and affirm when a good bishop does a great thing, or when someone who seems to have been on the fence comes out and drops the gloves. And I always make a point of saying something affirmative when a shepherd acts like one, because they're bound up in a kind of no-win situation if they speak out, and if they don't speak out, they're called Casper Milquetoast. So is that good advice to bolster what's good when it's done?
Yes, it is. Absolutely. You always want to positively reinforce, as the psychologists say. Just give him the good feedback, and also let him know that you're not just carping all the time.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, just a little caution there, along the lines of don't let him get away with it. If a bishop once every year on January 22nd says he's opposed to abortion, that's really not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can thank him for saying that, and maybe put in something about, you could say that more often.
That
is not heroism. That's the minimum.
I just read something that Bishop Joseph Strickland of Tyler, Texas, said in an article. I thought it made me chuckle. He said, "I'm paraphrasing. It's astounding to me when I'm called bold." He said, my family would never describe me as bold. He said, it's just my job description. I'm a successor of the apostles. I'm expected to do and say these things on behalf of my flock. And he's definitely on that short list of bishops where you go, someone who knows how to bish. So,
absolutely. Bishop Strickland is, frankly, I think, in a class by himself, in that he is willing to call out other bishops and say, look, I'm out here. I'm on the front line. We all agreed, we were all in the bunker, and we all agreed it's time to charge, and now I went out charging. Where are all you guys?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's like the last scene of the Mel Gibson movie, Gallipoli. You got one runner running toward the Turks. Hey, where's my army? Where's my peeps here? Yeah. The wonderfully named London Lynn Tyndale Biscoe. Great name. She says, Austin Ivory on Twitter says that Cardinal Burke is a schismatic and that he should give a pledge of allegiance to Pope Francis. Ivory also has a new book, Wounded Shepherd. I didn't know this. Wounded Shepherd, Pope Francis and His Struggle to Convert the Catholic Church. Phil, what are your thoughts on that? I wasn't aware of his new title.
I'd like to think he got an idea from another title, not a Wounded Shepherd, but a Lost Shepherd. I think that what he's doing with Cardinal Burke is vicious. It's completely wrong. Cardinal Burke has repeatedly pledged his obedience to the authority of the Pope. He is critical of the Pope, but he has repeatedly pledged his authority. He is the least likely leader of a schism that you could imagine. And to claim that he is already in schism is just, it's so clear, it's so blatant what he's trying to do. Is you shut somebody out of the discourse. Mm-hmm. You say, well, you can't listen. You can listen to everybody else, but you can't listen to those people.
Right.
And that's one of the ways that you gain the upper hand in an argument, by trying to shut everybody else down. The respectable people aren't going to listen to you anymore.
Sure. The chattering classes, the cocktail clash from the Upper West Side, right? Bob Sullivan asks, what are your thoughts on this? What if the Knights of Columbus followed the lead of legatus and escrowed their annual donations to the Holy See? Or groups like the Papal Foundation?
I would faint. I mean, it's not going to happen. I wish the Knights of Columbus don't do things like that, and that's a problem. That's why I'm not a Knight of Columbus.
Yeah, there seems a willingness to support things like John Allen's crux and this sort of kind of pretending to be Orthodox but really National Catholic Reporter style take on everything. That's underwritten by the Knights. It's disappointing because they're named, they're not named the Barney or the Mr. Rogers of Columbus. They're the Knights of Columbus.
Exactly. It's a resource, a potential resource that isn't being used for the defense of the church.
Any writers that you recommend? I noticed my good friend Monsignor Charles Pope joined. I love his writing. I just did a Coffin Report on an essay he did, a blog post on the church as bride and not as widow. I always find Monsignor Pope very inspiring and clear and wise. And I'll say normal, meaning he's down to earth. He's not super pious. Any names come to mind for people who are looking for resources that's not doom and gloom and constant carping, as you said?
Yeah. I just got my copy of Cardinal Sarah's new book.
Yep, it's on my table, 4 feet away. The day draws near, right? The
day is now far spent.
The day is now far spent. Yes.
Cardinal Sarah gives me great hope and spiritual nourishment. I have to mention my colleague Jeff Maris at Catholic Culture. My former colleague Tony Esselin just churns out all sorts of material all the time. I mean, he must pound keyboards into submission.
I believe that Tony Esselin is a Russian bot who does not require sleep.
That's very possible.
I can think. Peter's Pence. Phil, to your knowledge, has Peter's Pence dropped in its worldwide contributions? Anyone on that story?
As I recall, yes, it's down, and I can't tell you how much it's down. I haven't seen reports recently. The fact that I haven't seen reports is in itself kind of telling, because believe me, if it were up, you would be hearing about it.
Yeah, that's true. That is definitely true.
And collections are down across the board. That is a fact. Dioceses, the Vatican. There's very tangible evidence of the dissatisfaction of the laity.
Totally off topic. Well, it's not off topic, but it's a different question. You ran against Senator Ted Kennedy in Massachusetts. My gosh, year 2000 or so? Have you ever pondered getting back into standing for office?
I am the chairman of the local planning board. Is that good enough?
Are you saying you don't recall, Senator?
No, my political career outside of the town where I live is over.
Right. Was it fun? Is that a dumb question number 42? Had to have been a great life experience.
It was great fun. I mean, I had been involved in politics in every way. Working on campaigns, doing opposition research, speech writing, licking envelopes, fundraising, advising, and actually being the candidate was a lot of fun. It also was enough to convince me I'm not a good candidate.
You have to put up with constant verbal fistfights and threats and just strange pressures. I really don't. I admire anyone, liberal or conservative. I admire their willingness to step into that firestorm. It never seems to abate. I mean, I know congressmen personally. I have people that I know in Canadian politics, and it's a rough game.
It is. And it takes a particular personality. I mean, the funny thing is I'm perfectly happy talking to an audience. I don't care how large the audience is. But I just can't find it in myself to buttonhole people, to interrupt their conversations, to tell them to vote for me. It goes against the grain of my personality. And you really have to do that. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, politicians never stop campaigning. Mark Casanto, my good friend from Ottawa, in being faithful, not sitting on the fence, and wanting to live and speak the truth, I must ask you this, Phil. In light of many historical moments in the past with no technology, and from the point of view of local faithful Catholics who would find the news of the wider world little snippets at a time, can we justify the intensity and passion of the scandals, politics, posturing, etc. that goes on? Is it more intensified navel gazing to the goings on because of instant technology? The reason I ask is because the Holy Spirit would work just as hard then as now in the hearts of local parishioners. But I'm wondering about too much information for the average Catholic to digest in order to find the truth and not be confused with other sources. He goes on, but I think that's a really good point. The church does not operate at the speed of Twitter. And I myself, and I'll pitch to you, I have to be careful with what news media I consume because it can become an ocean of overwhelm. the internet has brought great things, but it's also brought 10,000 avenues of information, formation, and lies and fake news. What's your take on the information age, thanks to the internet and the sheer amount of information that comes at you daily?
Well, I think that we're in, the internet, it's a great resource, but it's like every other resource. It's a mixed bag. It can be used for good or ill. And I think we're still in the very early days of figuring out what to do with it. It's sort of like the Wild West. Or what it's more like, I tell students when I'm teaching about the American founding, it's like the pamphleteers in 1750s. They were wild. Some of them were irresponsible. Some of them were absolutely false, the pamphlets. And you can't consume them all intelligently. You really have to rely on somebody to winnow it out for you. And that's what editors are for. In a previous generation, you could rely on the editors of major newspapers to sort of tell you what's important and what's not. Now you just have so much information. All I can say is you have to do your own homework and figure out who you can rely upon and who you can't. And obviously I like it when people rely on me, because I try to perform that editorial function, give you what you need to know, and winnow out what is either unreliable or unedifying. Put it that way.
Last question. By the way, Monsignor Pope chimes in. Church finances at the Roman level, Vatican level, are, that is exactly how he puts it here. Here it is. Vatican finances are in serious trouble, National Catholic Register reporting. So, not that surprised. Oh, Brant Petrie, fantastic, great guy. Everybody, buy Brant Petrie's books, in addition to Phil Lawler's books. We talked a little bit off the air, Phil, and maybe we can close with this, how nowadays, for the last couple of years in the world of the Catholic Church, it's been very hard to parody some of the actual news. I wanted to ask you about the rise of parody news sites like Eye of the Tiber, which, by the way, I came up with the subtitle for that, Breaking Catholic News, so you don't have to. Eye of the Tiber for Catholics. The Babylon Bee, whose editor, Kyle Mann, I've interviewed. They and other parody sites serve a function, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. They're sometimes so good, and I really enjoy them at their best. Sometimes cartoonists are good at this too. Good cartoonists, of whom there aren't as many as you'd wish. To be able to put an argument in an absurd form so that anybody who's sensible immediately sees the absurdity of it is so much more effective than banging away with, logical arguments. Right. I love to see that done properly.
Yeah, same with comedians. Comedians can get things across with thick truth embedded in a laugh, in the way that a discursive lecture can never do.
That's very true. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. There's way too many.
No.
Yeah.
Including Facebook, go there.
Right. Okay. Just wanted to, maybe one or two more. I want to respect your time, Mr. Lawler. There's so many comments. I can't get to all of them. A lot of them are just, they're comments and not questions. I can't deal with comments. Luckily about YouTube in the comment box there is people begin to answer each other's questions. I just hands off. I don't want to be involved in that John Wayne bar fist fight. Okay. Well, Phil, what's the best way to connect with you? What's the closest distance between my listeners now and you?
You log on to the Catholic Culture website any day, catholicculture.org. And I'm we're posting news every day, and at least 3 or 4 times a week I'm posting some commentary there as well. And
you want to give out your Twitter handle?
I'd love to.
I'm gonna find it right now.
Thank you.
Phil Lawler's. I think it's Phil Lawler, capital.
It probably
also,
is.
your wife, your wife Lila is a wonderful Twitter contributor as well. I'll put that once we say goodbye, so it'll be hanging up here in the show notes.
You definitely want to look at Lila's site, likemotherlikedaughter.org.
Like mother, like
great.
daughter.org?
Yep.
Okay. Good word. Now, just let me find your Twitter handle, as the kids say. I just tweeted, is Twitter for Catholics a net loss or net gain? Because often, like with a really funny meme, like a political cartoon, your side laughs when the oxes that you want gored are gored. But, you know, there's the very limited ability to actually convert somebody by a tweet that you write. Twitter has somewhat become an echo chamber for the individual fiefdoms. You know what I mean?
It is. And it's interesting. I guess I'm a little old for this old dog, new tricks thing because, you know, I don't know my Twitter handle. I never look at it. I know what the guy says.
Do you have a pen, Phil? I'm willing to give you your own Twitter handle. It's a bit counterintuitive and complex. Phil Lawler. At Phil Lawler, which I don't think is capitalized sensitive. Phil, before I formally thank you, I want to remind folks there's a couple of seats left. Sorry, what's that? Yeah, we're issuing a last call for our Bavarian Catholic pilgrimage. We're going to Regensburg, Munich, Dachau. We're going to go to the Carmelite monastery there, have Holy Mass overlooking the death camp. We're going to learn about little Joseph Ratzinger. We're going to be in the church where Joseph Ratzinger was baptized. We'll hear about his call to the priesthood, his slow leadership advancement in the Catholic Church to the point where he was vicar, now the Pope Emeritus. We're going to go to Regensburg and hear about that controversial speech, which seems like last century, doesn't it, Phil? The Regensburg speech.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. And our spiritual director is Father Willie Raymond, who's the actor in the canonization cause of Father Patrick Peyton. And the culmination, in addition to daily Mass, of course, that's the main reason why you go on pilgrimage, to grow closer to Christ in the sacraments. But one of the highlights is the Oberammergau live Passion play. This happens once per decade, and we're going to see it. It's May 17th through 25th. Here's how you register. I'll just throw up the link there. Learn more and register at patrickcoffin.media/pilgrimage. I can't wait to get there. As I mentioned, a few seats left. Phil Lawler, thanks for cranking out high-quality stuff. You're always so balanced and wise, witty, always readable, and I hope you get what you deserve. Many, many more, even more readers.
I hope I don't get what I deserve, but thank you very much for having me.
That sounds like proselytism. I deeply apologize. All right. Also, get on the list for CoffinNation.com, the largest culture-building website in the world. Doors are opening soon for that. We're in 18 countries. We'd love to make it at least 19. In the meantime, it's CoffinNation.com. Be a saint. What else is there?